Alright, I managed to drive that pin out again. Now all I need to do is drive this collar down to this next hole, hopefully not disturbing the alignment with the hole, which I kind of have doubts about being able to not do because of the fact that every time I tap it, it looks like it moves a little bit. Actually, it looks like I did preserve the alignment. This little square block from the index mill hoard sure has come in handy several times now. I can actually stick the collar right in there and it doesn't really want to rotate. Makes a nice little stand. There we go. Ah, eureka! Alright, put my little pattern files away. Or Swiss files as they're sometimes called. I don't know. These are actual genuine Nicholson. These are old as the hills. Swiss pattern files. Anyways. Now, hopefully this is nowhere near as tight on this shaft as the other thing was, because it's going to be much harder for me to deal with this if it is. And of course it is. Thumb's still bleeding a little bit. $10 Oh, I can't believe I've been down here for like an hour now and haven't done much. Alright, so I know I'm going to have this bearing going here and that's going to be pressed on. So might as well get that over with. Okay, I wonder, it's a sharp shoulder there. I wonder if I should just bevel that with the grinder. Why wouldn't they have done that by design for aid in assembly? Alright, it's a large hole facing up. That's the large hole facing up there. And I would love to just pop that on there, but that'd be too easy. I've got to do this. This. Battery's dying. I was about to say that I just figured out that this bevel gear has to go in first before this gear because I couldn't get it to fit. But it turns out, like a Chinese puzzle, I get it just right, I can get it in. That wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And there's this little clearance cut out right here to drive the pin back in. Alright, so last night I finished assembling the this whole assembly right here. And now, today, I've decided I'm going to install it in the gearbox. Be one less thing I have to worry about kicking in, banging into, or finding a place to store temporarily. So, hopefully, my calculation will be correct. Yes. Excellent. Alright, now, this is held in with these two threaded screws from the bottom. But what occurred to me was that there's a potential for oil to leak out through these holes along the threads. So I don't know if there was any sealant on these or not. It almost looks like there might have been something there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wire wheel and clean up these screws. And then I'm going to put a little PTFE paste on here and then screw these in, and that should act to keep the oil from wanting to leak out along the threads. This is too hard to hold that up. It's too heavy to hold up with one arm and line it up. This will work better, I think. There we go. Alright, now I can mount this outboard bearing cup and all of that junk. Alright, now I think I'm going to put some thread sealant around this area right here so that it'll seal this area right in here so oil doesn't want to drip out that way. That ought to do it. Some's going to squeeze out. I don't want to overdo it. Worst case scenario is if this ends up leaking, I can take it apart later and reseal it, maybe with something else. So there's two locating pins right here. Pretty much spells out how this is going to have to go in. And because of the spacing of the screws, actually, it looks like it could go either way. Otherwise, I could turn this around 180 degrees. And I already checked, and this bearing seems to be slipping pretty easily onto the shaft, so don't think I have to worry about that. A little bit of paint. A little bit of paint on these locating pins, making them stick a little bit. Alright, now the bearing needs to go in further. Okay, so I get my sleeve. Now, this is the outer cover, and when I took this apart I discovered this groove that had nothing in it. And I'm assuming the groove was supposed to have something in it to keep oil from migrating along the shaft and leaking out and dripping off right here. So because of the design, I can't put an oil seal in there unless I modify this by cutting this outer flange out. Then I could put a push-in seal, and if I have to do that I will, but for the time being I just got this O-ring. And this O-ring seems like it was a pretty good fit to fit in the groove and yet still fit the OD of the shaft here. So not ideal, but the idea is that better than nothing. That's the thinking here. And what's that? Bit when I tried it before, and now it doesn't want to. Come on. There we go. Alright, that looks good. Now, let's see, how about a touch of lube on here. And just use a little of this mystery oil on my fingertip. Okay. Okay, I didn't have that seated in the groove enough. Now I seated it in the groove and it does slip on. So now I'll put, it's a good thing I didn't put this Teflon goop all over this thing before I started messing with it. I'd have more on my hands than on the unit. So that's going to push in that bearing. So I want the sealing power of the goop in question to be right along this area right here. And just around the screw holes. I'll probably put just a little bit on the threads of the screws as I put them in, and that'll take care of that. Try and wipe off this excess in the part that's up near the bearing. Put this on again. Now, let's see if I can get the screws to pull that in. Last night I was cleaning up and putting things away, and I put those 3 screws away and can't find them for the moment, but I know they're not far. So I just threw in 3 more screws that I had from the assortment of screws that fit this thing temporarily. I hadn't even cleaned those screws, but I just wanted to get this all closed up and push that bearing in there. I can always take those screws out. I didn't put any sealant on them, so I can take those screws out and replace them with the proper screws a little later. It's very hot and humid today, and the kids just got home from school. We're going to go for a swim while we can. A couple more weeks and the season will be over, swimming season, so I want to take advantage of it while we can. So this sounds really good. It doesn't turn very smoothly and easily, and that's actually drag that's being put on it by this O-ring. I mean, not a lot, but it's noticeable. Once this gets up to speed running with a motor on it, I don't think that's going to make a bit of difference. So this gearbox is almost done. Whew, it's the last week in August. I'm down here working this evening, and I'm glad to be down here. We had an unusually mild August as far as the heat and humidity goes. That was up until the last couple of days, and it roared back with a vengeance. I think it's going out with a bang. Had some thunderstorms just roll through, and that cooled it off outside a little bit, but it's still pretty hot and muggy upstairs in the house, but it's actually kind of nice down here in the basement. So I came down here tonight to go back to work on the Sipp, and I decided, I looked at after I put this cover on, I noticed that this groove right here on the shaft lines up with just outside of this cover. And I really don't like how tight that O-ring seems to be. It's actually not as bad now as it was before. My thinking was maybe I would take that O-ring out of that slot that I put it in and put it in instead here. Well, I guess for now I'm going to leave it right where it is, but I am going to change out these screws. I do think I found the ones that I had last night, because they've already been cleaned, and I think I cleaned those on the wire wheel already. So I'm just going to change out these screws, and I think I might put the center column on and mount the head up on top and start doing some work on that. Well, that don't beat all. I just took these screws out, we're putting the new screws in. These two went in fine, and when I put this one in, as I was tightening it down, all of a sudden I heard a snap, and I saw something sticking out from the side. So I tried prying it out, I couldn't get it out. I took the screw out, took out a little piece of cast iron with the hole in it, And then I noticed that now this screw head basically is not doing anything to hold this down. What has actually happened is I've actually broken out the little section on the back of this. When they made this piece and they countersunk this hole, they countersunk it so far that the material on the back there was very thin. Let me show you. This little tiny imperfection right here, this opening right here, that's the thickness of the piece that came out. So that's the thickness that actually the screw was bearing on. And what happened was, for whatever reason, I don't know if there's anything that got behind there or what, but this didn't want to close up. So it popped out. Force of me tightening the screw popped that piece out. I've now removed that piece so it wouldn't be in the way, because it now serves no purpose. And the only fix I can imagine right now would be to remove this screw and install a new screw that has a regular head on it maybe and a washer, and then that would allow me to pull this in. But I think I'm going to leave it alone for now, because the gap that is left here is so small I can just stick the end of this precision screwdriver into it. And I do have that, I still do have that Teflon paste in there, so I'm going to leave that be.